from three different. It is Tuesday, 11 o'clock ish, and this is a live stream of the Tattoo Weekly. If this is working for you, please let us know in the chat room so that, well, we'll know that it's working. In the meantime, I'm going to do the Reinventing the Tattoo Network introduction from memory, and then we'll be back with Marcus Lund, an awesome tattoo artist. I don't know if it's 2 decades or more. I don't know. He's got enough gray to be old enough to tattoo wild and crazy and artsy, still responsibly, and you're going to love his portfolio. Yeah, let me get started here. Welcome to the Reinventing the Tattoo Network, where tattoo artists, apprentices, collectors, and the curious all join in these live streams. Uh, Find us at real world events to share with each other and ultimately create better art and tattoos together. We're beaming out 4 or 5 days a week, nearly every day. And yeah, with your help and feedback, are turning these into shows that yeah, we like to make and you seemingly like to watch. Um, I want to thank our sponsors. We have, let's see, WorldTattooEvents.com, the largest, most comprehensive website that caters to tattoo conventions. And Alex has a whole new round of videos out. So you should check out WorldTattooEvents.com for all of your tattoo convention plans. And then, like I said, now he's got great coverage. Um, oh, I'm missing people. Okay, so we've got Reinventing the Tattoo, of course. We're being out, let's see, on the YouTubes. Do a search for Reinventing the Tattoo on the YouTubes. We've got the Roku channels, Reinventing the Tattoo. It's got like 12 different uh, channels or different shows going on at any given time, including the Drunk Critique. We've got a couple different free courses there at reinventingthetattoo.com. You can't learn how to tattoo for free, you know, of course, or you can't really learn online. But there's a tremendous resources. If you're an apprentice hopeful, there's lots of art classes, or even if you're a tattooer who needs to brush up, yeah, there's tons of information there. And then the Reinventing the Tattoo, it used to be the three ring binder, and it turned into the book, and then the book and the DVDs. Now it's this massive online course that guy keeps updated. So you know we were all bummed that we don't have the book to read, but it gets updated all the time, right? And so part of the problem is you know if he prints up more books, then next year he's going to want to change things, right? So anyways, if you're a tattooer, you could join either get the canon, the Reinventing the Tattoo canon, or there's also the evolution classes or any of the other classes. And then this is all founded from Guy Aitchison. He's the brain behind, again, the behind the inspiration for all this, the reason why we're sharing with each other. So GuyAitchison.com, and he's got some, you know, paintings. His paintings are out of control. I know he's going to be putting up some more. So if you're looking for some holiday gifts and are interested in some paintings, go to GuyAitchison.com. And oh, constructive criticism to management at reinventingthetattoo.com. All of the kind words and everything, please put up in the review sections and the comment sections so that other people will find out more about these shows. And I don't think I have any more of the introduction in my brain, so I'm going to take a breath, hand it over to Fawn, the our Tattoo Weekly co-host, and then we'll hop into an interview with special guest Marcus Lund, who's right here.
Nice job, Gabe. From memory, even getting better. It's a lot.
And I've been on for a week. No.
What was that?
And I was thinking about going on strike. No.
No, don't go on strike. We need you, Gabe.
I would stand in solidarity with the strikers if I was in the unions, but I'm not. So.
First of all, Marcus, thank you for taking the time to join us today. I know sometimes it's hard to sit down and actually like focus conversation about like what we've been up to and what's going on in the tattoo community. I've been familiar with you, and I actually today just realized that I wasn't officially following you from my personal account. I was like, how am I not following Marcus? Like I've known his work for years. But I would love to talk about, you know, what you've been up to, as well as there's a specific tattoo I think we could talk about today since it's Halloween. The Baba Yaga tattoo that you did. I I didn't even know that story until I did a Baba Yaga tattoo earlier in the year as well. So I had never heard that fairy tale in my entire life. So that was a really fun one that you and I kind of both share. So
So,
Super.
well, yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. I'm not sure it's my turn to talk, but
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, happy Halloween to everybody that's listening and so forth. I mean, this is technically, our industry's Christmas. This is when we're the most happiest. The veil is at its most thinnest. Life and death share the same space, as we can say. God, I mean, Halloween. It's changed over the its origin story till today, but it's still a fun day regardless. But I'm again digressing. So yeah, Baba Yaga. That was a fun one. Just simply the fact is just like it's a really interesting image when you're looking at the Baba Yaga house with the chicken legs on the house and so forth. It just has a great visual sort of like effect to people because they're kind of like, what is that? And then you kind of tell them, they're like, oh. Slavic mythology has a lot of like really, really crazy characters and spirits and so forth that I mean, you can pull so many amazing tattoos from a lot of world mythology and so forth. I mean, the Kikimori, for example, another one from Slavic mythology, really also kind of interesting. And then, I mean, when you start looking at mythology, you start looking at overlays and different stories from different cultures that um, have similarities and so forth. So, I mean, you don't have to really kind of pigeonhole yourself to like one specific image. I mean, it's easy to transition and find something else to be more original. I don't know. I tend to overthink everything, if you haven't noticed. So I tend to, to get into the hyper details and whatnot. And sometimes when a person says, hey, I want to get this, and my brain gets hold of it, I start pulling up stuff that he's never heard of that's similar and so forth. And like, wow, it's like, it's there. Just have to know the stories.
Yeah, that's funny because I feel like that's one of our responsibilities as an artist. Like, we can absolutely just tattoo somebody exactly the thing that they ask of us, but we can also like dig a little bit deeper and make sure it's either historically accurate or accurate to the folklore. Or I feel like one of the examples that I run into with this is like inevitably, occasionally, or all the time, I don't know, but people occasionally ask for a lion in the jungle. So I'm always like, I mean, yes, I can put a lion with like giant jungle leaves all around it, but they're from like the savannah, right? Which is like the opposite of a jungle.
They
So
run really.
that's a really like, I think it's a day one thing because I'm like into geology and biology, and like I have an idea of what things belong in what environment. But a lot of people don't. So sometimes that's a really profound, like I've really rocked their idea by like suggesting that we like actually like put the lion in the Serengeti or
Yeah,
in the savannas instead of like the Amazon, because
yeah.
they are not, that's not where they are.
It's yeah. I mean, I guess it's also due to, I'm not sure how old you are, but when I started tattooing, we didn't have the internet, so we referenced National Geographic, and
Mhm.
not like a DVD or anything. Like we had the books. I remember my mentor had like just shelves of National Geographics. Like every month, just grab
Real
one.
quick,
Doesn't matter
just to tag this, when and where is this?
when and where. We're talking about late '90s in Cyprus.
Yeah, cool. Yeah,
I mean,
I think we
it
jumped
but
ahead
it
a little bit. Why don't we give a little bit? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory here? So, how did you, end up in Florida near the Dali Museum? That's where we met. But obviously, well, again, we piqued everyone's interest with Cyprus in the '90s. Let's go back. How do you know all these stories? Where are you coming from? What's going on? How are you?
Well, I mean, originally I'm European. Born in Portugal. Swedish father, Portuguese mother. Raised more Swedish than Portuguese because my mother didn't like the macho mentality of the Portuguese. Didn't want to have little like I guess a little macho running around the house telling everyone what to do. So so she decided to kind of go more a Scandinavian way, which is I guess more socially conscious. But again, too much information. But moved to the States for a little bit, then moved back to Europe. Spent most of my time within um, outside of the education system, mostly in private British Montessori schools. Started at 2.5 years old. both my parents are educated, so they're like not gonna have dumb kids. Yeah, I guess typical, born 1976. So, that typical Gen X kind of situation, learned how to cook and clean and survive on my own by the age of 9. Um, we like to pretend that things are crazier now than then. But I mean, the 70s and the 1980s, we had more active serial killers in the world than at any other given time period. And I never got abducted. so, so I guess there's some testament of that experience in life. But ended up in Cyprus through a roundabout of things. Did a lot of world traveling. Spent time in Japan. Spent Middle East. Went to Africa, North Africa. There's a distinct difference. I want people
So
to
this
know
is
that.
like in your 20s, and how are you traveling through to these places? Like, how are you just kind of bumming around? Do you have a job, or you?
Kind of bumming around. At the same time, I mean, when I got into tattooing, we're talking about late 90s. Not really an environment that people were openly and friendly for you to come and start, working. It's usually you got to get into studios because you knew somebody, or maybe you met them at a bar and they were like, "Oh, you're cool," and then find out you're a tattoo artist, and it was like an easy thing. If you walked into a studio, you get mean mugged right away. It's sort of like, you're walking in foreign territory, and it's very gang-like, I guess you can say. Things are different now. The internet has changed that dramatically with social media and everything like that. People sharing information and ideas. It was a very guarded and caged world back then.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you could see it. I mean, you remember the Mad Hatters. I mean, it's not like you could sit there and go, "Hey, I'm going to get a booth at the Mad Hatters." It's like, no. Are you one of the best? No. Then you're not. You're not going to go other than attend.
Convention in Maine, and
Yeah.
back. Yeah, sure.
I wish we had more conventions like that. Just really kind of small, intimate, showcasing great artists, not people who just bought the booth. Like, I get it. There's a lot of people that, a lot of my friends have been on Ink Masters. I get it. It was great publicity for our industry, but at the same time, because you're on the show doesn't mean you won. So it's just a contestant. You're not the Ink Master. And then we have this now row in the middle of the convention, guaranteed position for them. And it's like, how does that really showcase us? We have so many great, fantastic artists that go by the wayside. I wish I had a bigger ego to fit the type of work that I do. But unfortunately, being neurodivergent, I don't really have it. I just kind of do it because I like doing art. It's a way for me to communicate with people. But I've gone really outside of the realm of where I came from. But oh God.
Right. So you're talking about references back in Cyprus, right? So it's like the amount of information that you had was a fraction of what's available today.
Well, I mean, at the same time, I guess you could say Cyprus was important for me because I had the opportunity to work with other tattooers that normally people wouldn't have been around. Dassos or Tas worked with my mentor, or started working with us in his early career, one of the modern primitives, and he introduced me to Mike of Athens and to a whole group of individuals that really appreciated tribalism and the concept of primitive art as historians. Tattoos or tattooers, we're historians. In no simple way. You go back 10,000 years to the first time we tapped something into somebody's skin. Why? It was to mark a time period in that person's life, which is literally history. And then every eon after that, every generation, every iteration of marking the skin, we've developed into this fantastic way to elaborate the human body into ways that people couldn't even conceive 100 years ago. 50 years ago, even 30 years ago. If you go back to the 1980s, people getting Tweety birds and Tasmanian devils, and it's like, yeah. And now people are running around with Japanese animation. It's the same concept of tattoo. It's just the art development and the ability to create that cartoon is better now than it was then. But again, it's the same idea. It's no different than you go back to, I love it when people talk about American traditional because it's a very interesting historical point of view. But you go back to before what we now consider American traditional and go back to traditional Western sailor tattoos, which are based off of scrimshaw designs, which again, it's another cartoon-like image created by an individual or illustration. But it's, you can see art changes, tattoo changes. The art changes, the tattoo changes. And it's kind of like we've been playing catch up for a long time, except for literally within the last 20 years. You now have artists who are performing their art in skin, not so much performing it on canvas or into any other mediums. It's now direct input, which I find is fantastic. I mean, granted, you got to know how to tattoo, but then you can really apply to other things. I mean, I come from a background of fine arts. So, I mean, I was apprenticed at the age of 16 with a painter. So it's always kind of been in my world, this sort of history blended with personal expression, I guess. Because I mean,
Actually, that's really wonderful to hear. I like to reflect on like my time as a fine artist before I was a tattooer. And I like to often think about how that still to this day influences like how and why I choose to tattoo the way that I do. Like I can tattoo photorealistically, but I prefer to make it look like they're paintbrush strokes, you know, and then it goes back to like, okay, here are these painting tricks that I love, and I love being selective about where you can see my process and where the process is hidden. But I love taking that fine art background and it's like translating it into another medium that wasn't meant to work that way. And when we can figure out how to like manipulate and push tattooing into the fine art that it has become, it it gets, I don't know, it's pretty cool to see that like within our lifetimes and in our careers. Like I remember back in the early 2000s, somebody told me they wanted a tattoo of a nebula, and I'm like, that's not even going to work. You like nebula, you like that's not really how tattoo art works. And then
but
I see them come back a few minutes later with this really like hard to interpret nebula. Like, yeah, the stars were in the same place, but it didn't really look like space. And then I look at what I do on a very regular, almost daily basis, and I'm doing like nebulas in outer space, like it was meant to be done from day one. But it's all
I
that
mean,
history that like
yeah.
leads to one technique piling on top of another that allows us to be able to do what we could do. 20 years ago, nobody would have thought of tattooing the things that we tattoo today, like your bright saturated watercolor stuff. 20 years ago, people weren't even trying to do watercolors in that way into the skin. But first, you have to know how to make a watercolor painting to then turn it into a tattoo. And I think
Almost,
that's one of those things that some artists kind of miss is actually knowing how to make the art that you're emulating on the skin. And
well, I mean, this is where it becomes difficult. Because first off, I like to consider myself still a fine artist. Tattooing is just a medium that I choose to work in. Because I still paint, I still draw, and I mean, now I'm getting into 3D modeling and all kinds of stuff. But you know, how you express yourself is how you express yourself. If you're getting paid through your expression, then you're an active artist, and then fine artist is just more of a definition for collectors and critics to sit there and say how resellable your work is. It's been always a fight, and I think you've had pioneers. I mean, you go back to the early 1980s, late 1970s, early 1980s. I'm not sure exactly when the piece was done, but back then they were trying to knock out what we now consider photorealism and so forth. I'm not sure if you remember the large back piece known as the Aviator.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite back pieces. It was done by Shotzi Gorman in 1980, I think, 79, 1980. Did the whole thing with a handmade, like 100-round liner. It was like he blunted in all sides, so it was basically like a big, just blunt Sharpie, and he just did the whole back piece that way. And it's beautiful. It's fantastic. But the problem is that we had a time period where that was shown in all the magazines and everyone saw it all over the world, but it became super iconic. People who probably tried to emulate that or try to copy of it. Some people probably did beautiful, fantastic pieces because they were inspired by it, but we never saw it because it never got into a magazine or it never got accepted into a magazine, which is the other side of it. I mean, there's still corporate interest. As I tell people, it doesn't matter how good you are in the art world; it's who you know. That's how you make it, which is unfortunate.
You know, one of the things Derb always talks about is like through the 90s and early 2000s, you know, his name was everywhere in magazines, but like if you knew the number of photos he was sending into those magazines and like hounding them to get his stuff out there, he'd send a whole packet of photos, and the one they would put in would be like this little nautical star that like was
Yep.
a drop in the bucket compared to what he was capable of. So like, yeah, he'd get the exposure, but like he's like, out of all of them that I sent, that's the one you picked.
Mhm.
I was like, well, why'd you send one that you weren't that proud of? He's like, well, now I don't know, but then I was proud of all of it. I wanted any of it to be exposed. So it's
No.
funny how like sometimes it just, you might get selected, or your work might get selected 6 or 8 months later just because of like it was a topic that was an article in the magazine. So like it might not even be a good representation of what you're capable of, but here's one of 100 other stars.
I mean, to
You
a
know?
degree, it was fantastic marketing on the magazine side of it because every tattooer bought one. And the first thing we did is we skipped over all the articles and we got to that back section of the thing. We started flipping through and just looking for our name, looking for our piece. I mean, I was sending hundreds of photos to probably about a dozen and a half magazines from both the United States and Europe, just trying to get in. I mean, I remember the first time I got into Tattoo Veer, it was a little tiny black and gray piece that I had done, and I'm like so proud of it. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, I left it open all the time, just that page. So every time I walked by, I could see it. And I was like, yeah, I got in Tattoo Veer. And I was just like so super proud of it. But nowadays it's a little different because I guess that dopamine rush that I got looking at that magazine was sort of more well deserved. I felt more like I deserved it versus like getting 100 likes on an image. It's, I mean, but it's a different type of rush. It's like not many people got it, and now it's your social media.
Well, here's
So,
one of the cool things about having our work published and actually put into print. You know, every day we
yeah,
talk about how permanent tattoos are and how they're this, you know, huge commitment, and they are. I'm not downgrading that at all. But at the end of the day, tattoos are very temporary. You know, they only live as long as the person wearing it, and only as many people see that tattoo as the person wearing it is willing to show. But when we get our work printed, it is now cataloged. That is a piece of history. Like people will have those magazines sitting on their shelves basically for eternity. That's part of a library now. So if and when Instagram ever crashes and we lose our entire portfolios that we have on there and we have to start over, you know, we've still got our original files, but that catalog could be gone from one major crash.
oh, yeah.
But anything that's actually been put into print, you know, that's what's going to stand the test of time. Like if everything were to crash tomorrow and we were to say, what is tattooing? We're going to have all the magazines from the 90s and early 2000s. And that's going to be the starting point, really, because we don't have as many formal records of our tattoo work. So in
Well,
addition
and
to the notoriety, that's a
books, right?
cool
So,
thing about having your work published.
Yeah.
What's that, Gabe?
so I was going to say, and we've got Adrian Lee's books and Guy's books,
Yeah.
right? Those are massive tomes of tattoo documentation.
I mean, Mickey Violetto probably. I mean,
and Mickey too, yeah.
he's interesting character, but I have to say that what he's done for the historical content of tattooing, it's been fantastic. Especially with especially cataloging stuff from Horiyoshi in the early years, and so forth, really kind of started to again foundation the fact that we do have an ancient historical thing that we're doing. It's not like it was invented 100 years ago or when the TV decided, oh, tattoo's cool now, so now it's new, it's tattoo, yay! It's like no, it's been around for thousands upon thousands of generations. I'm not even talking about years. I mean, generations are it's a much deeper effect, because when we take a look at old tattoos, like I mean, even when I see old people walking around with stuff they got done in the 50s, I'm just like, oh, let me take a look at that, because I want to take a look at how it was done, how how it's progressed over time. My dad has a beat up tattoo. Oh my god. This is where you sometimes have to realize that we've learned so much about skin and so much about tattooing. We don't do this anymore. My dad got a hand tap piece in like Karachi back in like the 60s. And a week later, he said it looked fuzzy. So he had it retouched in Mumbai by another Indian.
Week later.
A week later. And of course, it was blown out. And then he just went ahead and retouched a blown out tattoo that was still healing. And now it looks like complete crap. But it's hilarious to take a look at that level of like skin damage done so many years ago to like, comparatively to today. So, I mean, there, even again, it's paying attention to history, and then we can learn from those things and see what we can and cannot do. I mean, I guess somebody would really like the effect of what a twice blown out tattoo is supposed to look like, but
I think if I ever open a tattoo shop again, that's what I'm going to call it, is a twice blown out tattoo.
twice,
Stop in. Twice blown out tattoo. Stop in today.
yep, it's solid.
Open chair.
But
Sorry.
I mean,
I
blown out
shouldn't poke so much fun.
bit. I guess you technically it's not really blown out, but when I do like blackout tattoos and stuff like that, I do tattoo it at a very, very steep angle, to kind of really just shoot the ink out up underneath. It just helps you more solid and black. That's stuff that again, that's 90. That's not. It's funny when I watch some of these Russian tattoo blackout stuff, and I'm just going to use these massive mags that are all straight, just grinding away on that skin. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
there's an easier way to do that.
It's funny. I have some large mags. I don't do a lot of blackout work, but like in the large nature of work that I do, oftentimes there will be a large cover up hidden in an entire sleeve, or you know what I mean? So there are areas that like I do have those big mags to, cover ground quickly. But the thing is like working at the True Tubes booth, the True Tattoo Supply booth, it shows so many people come up asking for big mags that it's almost like, what are you doing with this? Like what like
No,
tell me what you're doing before I sell this to you,
I tell people
feel like
that.
they're
I mean, I learned large mag techniques with Joshua Carlton, and that was more for black and gray, and stuff like that. You can use it a lot more like a paintbrush. I never looked at a large mag as a solid packing or outside of that. It's always been for
I
black
agree.
and gray for me.
Yeah, I
Never
feel like
color with a 45 or a 55 mag.
I can saturate the most quickly with either a 9 or a 15. Like those
Yep.
are my two mags of choice. And I feel like, for instance, if I do keep 23 mags on hand, and I do have some of the big boys on hand too. But what I usually use those for is if I'm like feathering a background where I don't want it to be fully saturated. And that's almost the only thing I use them for, is if I'm going from like a fully saturated background right around the focal point, and then I want it to like when I don't want you to be able to tell where the tattoo stops. That's when I'll use my big mags and just kind of keep it soft and feathery. But like I feel like I don't saturate faster with a bigger needle. It's a misconception that you get more done with a bigger needle.
The problem is that kids don't make needles anymore, so they don't understand the function of a tattoo needle. If you make your needles, you understand, again, especially if you're a painter, you can find the relation between a paintbrush and a tattoo needle. Filberts and brights are the same as flat and curved mags. It's just you have to understand how to use those and when they come in handy. I still use squared mags and curved mags. Depends on what I'm using it for. But when you start going to a larger formation of needles, you're spreading out that impact area much further. And with elasticity of skin, when it comes down, you're just going to sometimes not hitting as much on the center of it and more off on the edges, or more in the center, depending on your angle and stuff like that. So the wider you're spreading it, the more inaccurate you are, because curvature of skin plus it's supple, the whole
Well, one of the things I run into when I'm talking to people is though a lot of people, so to rewind, when I did primarily black and gray, I used a lot of curved mags. I used
Mhm.
curved mags almost on every tattoo, but
Right.
now that I'm concentrating on color, I'm concentrating on saturating as efficiently and as evenly and
Mhm.
consistently as possible. So that's where I like I said, that range from like 9 to
Oh,
15,
timing.
I can work detailed and I can work fast and I'm
Right.
saturating consistently. But one of the things I ask people when they're using curved mags or when they're buying large curved mags, it's like, are you doing a lot of touch-ups because things are not healing as smoothly as your healed or as your photos when you're finished? And I get a lot of feedback, but that yes, things are smooth when they leave, but they come back splotchy. And that's the inconsistency that you and I are talking about because the needle depth isn't going all the way to the same like millimeter in the skin. And that's what you want. You want all of that ink to be at the same level or layer in the skin. So if it looks like solid black, but you
Yeah.
see it 2 weeks later and it looks splotchy, it means that you're not stretching the skin enough or you're using the wrong needle. One of those two things is the problem.
Can you give me just one quick second? I just got to grab something real quick at the door.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Gabe. We're getting technical on you.
Oh, no worries at all. Maybe when he comes back, we could end up with one of the stories for one of the tattoos, one of the legends or the lores. I mean, I don't mind
I
touching.
haven't really, I only pulled up the one tattoo off of his Instagram, so maybe we can, would you
Hi.
care if I share some of your work?
Sure. Yeah. I'm not embarrassed by it.
Get it pulled up.
I'm super inconsistent.
Sorry, I'm not real fast at the behind the scenes stuff at all. Here we go.
And so Marcus, you want to talk about how people can get tattooed by you? Or I guess, yeah, we have some of the clients that you might want to talk about. But in the course of this, let people know how they can get in touch and if they want to get tattooed by you, what your favorite types of tattoos are, etc.
God, one of my favorite types of tattoos. I look again. It's really based on concept. I can sit down and discuss with people, styles and so forth they can pick and choose from. As I tell people, we have 3,000 years of recorded art history we can pick a style from. So it's I don't try to pigeonhole myself too much with a particular style. I just want to be expressive. Concept is important. I mean, I don't want to end up having somebody give me an exact order of everything that doesn't give me any room to express myself as an artist. But yeah, best ways is email, which foxandspider.com. Sorry, foxandspider@gmail.com. That would be important to say that. Social media. I mean, I do respond to almost every message that comes through there. If not me, my assistant. Sometimes we have automated stuff. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really quite sure. This is why I'm absolutely terrible at self-promoting and self-marketing. I'm just the quiet little nerd that just likes to draw.
Love these watercolor. I keep crapping on these watercolor examples because I love the way you can tell you've actually either like taken the time to do a watercolor painting first and then replicated it, or you've done so many watercolor paint you just know.
Yeah.
And also, I think this is a great idea.
Oh,
You've got all these paintings ready to go, and I like that you've marked the ones off that are sold. This is like the old school. This is the way we used to use Flash, but now you've got like actual original paintings to choose from.
yeah. And it's nice because I mean, I don't like to replicate work anyways. It's really easy to replicate work, especially if you're very commercial in your style. I tend not to be commercial in my style because I guess I already have a commercial style, which is my still life painting. I mean, I was an active painter before I got into tattooing. So I guess I prepared my name in the world of classical art. And when I got into tattooing, it was a way for me to kind of travel, work when I traveled, and to be still expressive. But it wasn't until like 2006, 2007, I started to really see that the two things can actually share the same space, and I can be expressive and artistic at the same time within tattooing, starting with going into abstractions and watercolor. Watercolor was really me trying to find a way for there to be a feminine style of painting, or feminine style of tattooing, because I mean, the 90s, we decided that feminine tattoos were just diminutive, like anything tiny that was a girl's tattoo. And it didn't really sit well with me. I always kind of felt slightly trashy when I did them, because they were just didn't really fit the artistic idea of what a feminine line or feminine colors or anything was like that. So 6, 7, I started playing around with doing watercolor tattoos. I think my first really successful one was one I did in Cocoa Beach at my friend Mark Longnecker's studio. Yeah, I see it pop up on the internet every once in a while. It's kind of funny. It's a watercolor butterfly. Well, it's two butterflies kissing. It was for a gay couple. Everyone thinks it's one butterfly. So I've seen copies done by other people when they've come across it, and it's kind of funny because they try to merge the center into one when it's two of them. It's not a mistake.
Isn't it funny when replicated and they are so far off of the mark that it's almost like I'm not even insulted that you ripped that idea off. Bad job.
I warn people. I mean, I've been doing it for the last 15 years. Try not to copy my work, because as I found out a couple of years ago, I'm on the spectrum, so I've always overthought things and kind of did my little, I guess, chewed the marrow on the bone till it's not there anymore, in every single image. So a lot of my tattoos hide a lot of personal information to the wearer, that people might not be completely aware of. And using an old Polynesian concept is you don't copy another one's tattoo, because you are trying to imitate their mana. So you're trying to imitate their spirit, which is then denying your own identity, which, you know, if you look at it in spiritual ways, it's not the most best thing to do. Is
You know what's funny? I have definitely seen like my tattoos and my designs replicated and redone. Like in small towns, if one person gets something cool, you'll notice like 6 or 7 people with a very similar idea, just because, like, you know, people aren't always good at being creative, and that's just how it is.
I can see that as
But one of the things that like makes me so much angrier is I saw a really bad knockoff of my chest tattoo. Like my whole chest is fully covered. And, you know, we were 2 sessions in. So there was, Ty McEwen and Adam France did my chest collaboratively. So just because they live far apart, it was done over about 3 years. And after our second session, I saw a really bad rip off of it that, like, you can tell they were exactly ripping the elements of it off and the placement and stuff. But the artist that like did, we'll call the copy, the artist that did the copy turned like the filigree and scroll work into like these weird octopus tentacles, where like at the time it did kind of look like that, but all that was in there was the shadow tones and none of the greens. So it's like, not like, even though you did a really bad job, I felt like there was like a heat in my chest. I felt so upset that somebody else took the design that was made for me by 2 artists that I looked up to, and like it was about my story and my connection to both of them, but to see somebody wearing it totally differently and having no connection to it whatsoever, that was a really weird kind of emotion, and like a different kind of like, like, I want to call it anger, betrayal. Like it was a different kind of feeling than having my work, like a tattoo that I had done copied.
It's, I mean, again, not trying to slam the internet, because it's a wonderful tool. It's Pinterest is a new flash wall. People walk
Pinterest.
Old tattoo and they'll sit there and look at the flash wall and like, okay, I want this in small, medium, large, and just pull up the Cherry Creek file and off you go. But now with Pinterest, people see tattoos or even just following people, and they see something and they're like, oh, I really like that. Instead of contacting us, the original artist, and seeing what we could do for you, so you can get your own original piece that other people can be envious about, they go and they take it to the local artist who, you know, I hate to say this, but there's a lot of people in our industry that just don't care about what you get. They just want to get the money that's in your wallet.
Mhm.
So they can go home and spend it in some kind of way, or it's as a necessity or not a necessity. I mean, survival rules are survival rules. I'm not going to try to determine choices on that. But it's just a shameful thing, because you have an appreciation for the piece and then you want to get it emulated. You go to an artist who just grabs the image and tries to replicate it as exact as possible, not understanding what they're doing, and you get a bad copy. If the artist had integrity, he could take the design, try to interpret it into his own manner, replicate it. That's fine, because that's appreciation of my work and using my work as a study, and you continued on from it. I'm all for that. It's that total complete replication. I mean, look at The Rock. I mean, as soon as he posted a tattoo, how many thousands of, like, excuse the term, but flea market tattoo artists were slamming it on there. I mean, there's still people running around doing fake Polynesian tattooing when they don't understand that this is a sacred art form to very ancient people, and you're just willy-nilly throwing it around. Every single image means something, and how each one of those images are put together tells a story. That person's individual story, their family, their bloodlines, their connections, everything like that. You can have a Polynesian tattoo. They don't say don't get one. They just get your own, which, it's the same thing with all types of tattoos. You look at, say, a new school piece that you really, really like, talk to the artist and do it. He might come to a tattoo convention and so forth. This is what collecting art is. When going back to that feeling of fine art, every artist should be respected for the art that they produce. If you're just forgeries, then you're not an artist, and then you're part of this black market, which has been slowly sucking all of, I guess you say, the nice stuff out of our industry, because some people join in and all they do is they focus on new artists and ignore the older artists that the new artists had learned from and completely ignored them. It's mad. I mean, I can go on for hours about this. It's not me trying to.
It's funny when we talk about the idea of like replicating or copying another artist's work. Like, first of all, if you're going to try and replicate it, you need to have that skill set. But if you have that skill set, you probably wouldn't copy it. You'd make your own version of, which is what you're saying. But this kind of leads me back to one of the things that keeps coming up in conversation all the time is the AI generated tattoos. And I think that's going to cause a real funny thing in the community, because people are going to take those AI generated images that they make that tell their story, and they're going to take them to their small town tattooer. They're going to take them to whoever their tattooer is of choice, and they don't have the skill set to replicate that. Like, some of these things that we can do with computers and 3D modeling, like, are really hard, tricky things to replicate as a tattoo. I've done a lot of surreal work, and there are, like, I seek out those challenges. But if you're not seeking out, like, if you're not seeking out to tattoo the impossible every day, you're not going to be able to tattoo these AI generated images. And I don't mean that in any way other than it's just a fine skill set. Like, you have to be capable of doing photorealism, and then also want to do not photorealism. You want to make it surreal and make it somebody else's story, but then also have this heartless machine that generated it that doesn't have any warmth. So, like, for me, sometimes when I'm brainstorming about a tattoo, I'll pull up my AI and I'll put in my prompts and I'll just start looking through images. Do I tattoo any of those images? No, but I'll be like, "Oh, that's a cool idea. Noted. I'll save that."
The floral piece, the 54 florals that it did, actually started with AI generated imagery.
Nice. And then you built upon it, right?
I stopped it at 70%. So I didn't get a rendering. I got this sort of ambiguous thing. And then from there, figuring shit out and then just pulling it out and extrapolating it from there. But but again, you still have to have that input and so forth. But what I was trying to say is, like, for example, how many tattooers out there are tattooing Jack Rudy skulls and don't know they're tattooing Jack Rudy skulls?
That's a
It,
good one.
it's the same thing. I mean, these people are like, yeah, this is original. I'm like, no, dude, that's Jack Rudy skull.
You know what I started doing after
40 years.
tattooing for about a year? I'm not Catholic, but I did grow up in a Catholic community, so there's a lot of things that I kind of know just from like having dinner regularly with my Catholic friends growing up. Um, but when I was maybe like 9 months in when somebody asked me to do a sugar skull on them. And I was like, "Are you even Catholic?" And they're like, "What are you talking about?" So, like, from that point on, to kind of circle back to our earlier conversation, like having like the respect for your own work and the respect for your client to help educate them, that like, yeah, you see this in magazines all the time and everybody gets it, but do you even understand what it represents? Like, and then I started asking people whenever they'd ask for a sugar skull or like a Day of the Dead type tattoo, I'd be like, "Can you tell me what this means?" And if they could, I would happily do it on them. But if they couldn't, I would talk them into like coming up with an original idea. Like, if you just want to get tattooed, I will tattoo you, but let's tattoo you something for you that nobody else has. Like, it'll take the same amount of time and cost you the same to get something custom for you.
Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorite terms, actually. It's oh, I can't wait to get tattooed. Yeah, what do you want to get? Oh, I don't know. You just want to feel pain of a needle going into your skin. Not
That's not the way I like to get
way to
tattooed.
come into this. It's like you come in with a concept first, and then you deal with the pain because you're happy about the image. But it's again, we're at a unique situation in history where people are treating tattoos to a certain degree like costume jewelry. I mean,
Mhm.
I've on a rare occasion, but I've had a couple people in my career that have, like, in the middle of their first session, sit there and turn to me like, "How easy is it to get rid of this tattoo?" And I just
Not easy.
put my
It's
machine.
not easy.
Well, if we stop now, it'd be much easier for you.
Yep.
So, and I don't like that, because it's once you have the mentality that this is not permanent, you're not respecting the thousands of years that people have been receiving the marks on their skin.
That's a really good way to think about it because, like, for me, when I tattoo, I think there's a huge element of like uh spirituality and like connectedness to my client. Like, a lot of times I even almost describe it as if I'm a conduit from some like where the ideas and the energy is coming from somewhere else. So I feel like because I take it so seriously and I love that spiritual side of it, that magic side of it, I feel like
Well,
when you
tattoo.
don't respect it, you miss 75% of what a tattoo is about.
I mean, you know the magic of a tattoo. When you sit there and you apply a tattoo to somebody and they walk over to that mirror and they take a look at it and they have no words, tears roll up in their eyes, or
Mhm.
like they're just completely gobsmacked. And it's like, that's a moment of magic. Or even as something as simple as cancer survivors and just doing an areola repigmentation, them
Mhm.
looking down and seeing little brown spots where there wasn't brown spots. And now they're just over the moon. They're feeling whole and complete. I mean, yeah,
Isn't that a cool thing that we get to do to people
we are wizards.
or for people? Yeah,
We are
it's a
wizards.
pretty magic moment.
Hmm.
I like to celebrate the fact that like in doing what we do, we have the chance to affect people in the way that therapists can't. Like, when somebody comes and sits down with us for an hour or 4 hours or 4 sessions or 10 sessions or whatever it is, they sit down with us, and when they stand up and walk away, they feel better about themselves than before they started. They
Sometimes,
feel stronger. A
yeah,
lot of people, if you've gotten big work, you know that it helps you understand your own patience and your own boundaries and limitations so much more. And I feel like those are the kind of things like I didn't become a tattooer to affect people that way, but now that I do affect people that way, I can't stop. Like,
well,
I don't know a therapist that can
yeah,
do what I do as quickly as I do for people. And I'm not saying I solve all their problems. I'm just saying we have the ability to make somebody feel better about themselves, period. And that's
we
a really special thing.
we create a cathartic moment for people to realize themselves,
Mhm.
because they can't hide from pain. And in that, I'm not trying to get into a masochistic or a sadist ideology, but there's something pure and something unadulterated by coping with your pain. Because there's no way of escaping it. If you're in that tattoo, it's not excruciating pain. It's like, you know, again, it's a tattoo. It's a micropigmentation with dermal abrasion. It's not a very, we're not removing a limb or trying to even set in an IV. It's quite not invasive if you really think about it. But it's that moment that person has with themselves that I think that a lot of truths they get to face. Some people don't because they're oblivious to those things. But I mean, everyone's going to be different. Everyone's going to take a different experience. Some people feel more connected with the people they're around because of their tattoo. Most people, in my experience of 25 years of doing this, really find something inside them. And especially since I always try to create a much more calming environment. No more of the clubhouse days of insane loud music and stuff like. I mean, I still have my drum and bass and things like that going on, but I do that for more of a metronome for myself when I'm tattooing, depending on what I'm doing. If it's a blackout, yeah, I'm going to throw on some techno music or industrial or something like that just to keep that 160
in that vibe.
BPM. Yeah, here we go. But most of the time, I mean, I'm running really soft, relaxing music and trying to create more of a vibe for people to kind of just be relaxed, because what's going to go on may not be relaxing for them. And I want them to already be in that state. I do use also sometimes sound therapy, I guess you could call it. I do use some music that retains shamanic drumming, which runs between 3 to 5 hertz, which activates human REM. So you can actually use music to help sedate your clients and put them into a more calm state of being, which makes it easier for you to tattoo. Because some clients.
It's true. Sometimes when I have a client who's struggling, and I've always done this, usually it'll be like, what music do you like? And I'll find whatever we have in common to listen to all day and just put that station on. And I listen to all kinds of music, but like when I can tell my client is either struggling mentally or struggling physically, that's where I just put on like the chillest, maybe not instrumental, but just very calm music or older music that's kind of like, soul food for the ears. But one of the things that I like to do when I especially have a client that's really struggling for whatever reason is several years ago, Jeff Gogwe made this film called Surrender. Have you ever seen that?
Perhaps.
Well, it starts off kind of just documenting his trip to Japan, and then it ends up being like a documentary about the process of his back piece. And then it also like jumps into some of his clients sharing their experiences and stories. But I like it because you hear somebody starting off, he's a tattooer, he knows what to expect, but you hear how he got into his back piece and it was a struggle and it was a challenge for him. And he had these moments where he like broke down in front of like the people he looked up to. And um but he had that moment where he had to like make the decision to surrender to the process. Like if you're in it, you're in it and you've got to surrender to it. It's going to be brutal, it's going to suck, it's going to draw the life out of you, but again, when you reemerge, you're stronger than before you laid down to like surrender yourself to the process. And I just really liked sharing that documentary, especially when people are struggling, because, I can tell my client, like, I know what you're going through. I've been here. But when they watch this video that's not just Jeff, but it's Jeff and his clients, and you get to see all of their journeys and you get to see that it is a spiritual journey for all of us. And when we're getting large work or even small work, you do have to surrender to the process. But once you surrender, you receive all these gifts that you didn't even know you were going to, like I mentioned earlier, like the patience, fortitude, the idea of like no matter how bad something is, like I've sat through, like if you've sat through 10 hours of being tattooed on your torso, you can deal with any life problem, you know what I mean?
But but I mean, again, we're in a society that we've gotten so used to sedatives and so forth that, you know, people are coming in getting tattooed already pre-numbed, and I'm like, what'd you use? Oh, I just got this stuff online. I'm like, I don't even know what this stuff is. You know, I wipe all the stuff off the surface of your skin, so I make sure I don't tattoo whatever that stuff is into your skin, and something bad happens.
And then
But
you just gotta hope and pray that whatever it was
yeah,
wasn't a vasoconstrictor that's basically killing the top layer of skin cells before we even tattoo them.
and that's where again, it's this we've gotten to such a point where people think that that's normalcy and forget that, again, we've been doing this for a long time without sedatives. I mean, yes, some people, we did use some sedatives. I guess, you know, there's the old school way of putting a little bit of coke in each one of your ink caps to help numb out your client. That's an old school 70s trick. I don't condone it. But
It would be the vasoconstrictor that we're talking about. You don't
yeah,
want a vasoconstrictor.
no. Or, you know, alcohol and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's, you look at people that still do the traditional way of doing the tattoo, from traditional Japanese to traditional Polynesian to um, even scarification getting in Africa and so forth. These people aren't taking sedatives, they're not taking anything to numb it, because they realize that this is a sacred moment and they're going to experience that moment. Um, I think if people look at tattoos the same way, I think they'll have a little bit more respect for what they're doing versus, oh, I'm so afraid of the pain. If you're just worried about the pain, then don't get a tattoo. But
Hold on just a moment, Marcus. I lost my audio.
Oh, I can hear you.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
I've been, yeah. Can you hear me?
There we go. Now I can hear you. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I lost audio.
Yeah. But yeah.
We're on a pretty good roll, but we're probably down to about 5 more minutes. Is there anything else you want to include before we wrap up?
Other than the classic "stay young, stay foolish," no. I mean, be expressive. Don't let ideas stop you. As long as you have the skill to produce the idea, then go with it. Tattooing for cool guy points is the dumbest thing in the world, because when you get to my age and the youth don't think you're as cool because you're not the same age as them, what do you got holding? What do you have going for yourself? Tattooing is not a job. It's a lifestyle that will stay with you for the rest of your life and can be very rewarding and take you all over the world. So, I mean, for those who are listening that want to learn how to tattoo, talk to somebody that you respect. Look at their work. Again, draw. The secret to art is repetition. The more times you do it, the better you're going to be at it. If you look at Japanese stuff, each artist has maybe a handful of different flowers they reproduce over and over and over and over and over again, and then that's why they look so perfect every time. So again, that's all I can kind of say. Respect the neurodiverse community. There's a lot of artists out there who are on the spectrum, and if they're having a bad day, they're not being an asshole. They're having a day that they're being overwhelmed. So respect that fact. If they come in the next day all happy and you're still shitty with them, it's realize that we're all different people, and some of us needs to just have a little extra time to cope with the world around us. But other than that, yeah, thank you.
Awesome. You want to throw out your handle so people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me at Marcus_Lund on Instagram, foxandspider.com, which may or may not still exist. I'm trying to shut that one down. Moving out of the whole group studio thing and into my own solo stuff again. But best is Instagram, Facebook under Marcus Lund. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. We were really on a good roll right there. So I would love to talk to you more about tattooing, tattoo collecting anytime. So,
cool.
We'll go ahead and end this. We lost Gabe a little bit ago, but we're sitting right at the hour mark now. So everybody tune in next week for more of what's going on in the tattoo community. Thank you again, Marcus. Have a great afternoon.